We're not the type to play games, you can state claims. Came to show the movement moving like a freight train, breaking walls and crumble earth with every step we take. We walking by with lash and your neck will break. Never let it stray, so say it wrong or set it straight. So coming at us with an awkward demeanor is leaving your life in the dead of fate. So pedal straight, avoid these shots, we send it all costs. Truly believing that it'll be different, we watching your body get hauled off. Simple as this, we giving the vibe of the revolution that we living within. Diminish the doubt of the haters that talk on the low because of this minuscule shit.
It's the song that never ends, but it's the song that never ends, but it's the song that never ends, but because it's easier to say bad things about people than it is to say good things about people. So D&D historian Benn Riggs has jumped into the deep end of the Gary Gygax Dungeons and Dragons conspiracy history hullabaloo Wizards of the Coast false narrative. And he made a very interesting and provocative statement, which of course has rung the bells on both sides about the history of the hobby and the history of Gygax. There are those people who 100% agree. Oh my God, Gary Gygax was a horrible, awful person. D&D before today was a horrible, awful game. And there's some people who disagree. No, Gary Gygax was a wonderful person and D&D before today was great. Somewhere in the middle, there's the actual truth. Now I'm going to toss out a few things to before we dive into the rambling that I'm well known for. So first and foremost, of course, this is just my opinion based upon my experiences in the hobby over the past 40 years, seen through a very warped view, because obviously my gaming experience, as I learned more and more, was extremely different than most people's gaming experiences. I'm not sure why, but apparently it was. Okay, so let's take that with a grain of salt. Two, history is written from the perception of the person telling the story, right? There's history and there's facts. And depending upon the person telling the story, you can perceive the information in multiple ways. I mean, we can just use what's going on in the everyday world right now with the politics. Depending upon which news person you're watching, your candidate of choice is either absolutely wonderful or absolutely awful. And all you have to do is go from channel to channel to channel and to see the perception of the actual events change based upon the person telling the history. So the actual history of Gary Gygax Dungeons and Dragons, as seen through the lens of the individuals in charge, will be variables. Benn Riggs, it claims to be a D&D historian. So let's start with, who's Benn Riggs? Because I looked him up on the internet, and the best thing I could find out was he wrote a book. He's traveled the world, and he's like 30. And he lives in Wisconsin. That's yeah. I don't know how that makes him an expert, because he wrote one book, but I guess he's a D&D historian. I wrote 10 screenplays, one of which got made into a movie. Does that make me a Hollywood director? Or a Hollywood historian? I don't know. Is Benn Riggs just jumping on the let's bash Wizards of the Coast Gygax because it's easier? Now, I never met Gygax. I don't know Gygax. I am in a rare position where I don't give a fuck about Gygax. I'm a Dave Hargrave guy. I'm a Jeff D guy. I'm a Sandy Peterson guy. I'm a Call of Cthulhu guy. I'm a superhero guy. You know, I'm a Palladium guy. People who matter to me, my role-playing pantheon, Gygaxes and Arneson are like, yeah, they made the game. So yeah. Gygax was the guy. Gygax was the dude. I have heard things about Gygax that would turn your hair white, to use a paraphrase, in regards to awful things he did. I've also heard stories about Gygax that would make you think, oh, wow, he's a really amazing, wonderful, loving human being. At the end of the day, all Gygax did And all Dave did was create a game about elves with sticks going on adventures. That's it. That's it. What he thought, said, did outside of the parameters of stupid game about elves with sticks didn't matter. It is not a guidebook to bettering your life. It is not an engine for social change, nor is it something to be, you know, Mein Kampf, nor is it a guide to how horrible, awful things were. Now, you know, in regards to anything that wasn't a bunch of old white dudes playing war games in the middle of nowhere in Lake Geneva. You know, Gygax has been portrayed as a horrible, awful, racist, sexist, homophobic, misanthropic, awful person. You know, we could say that he is amongst the pantheon of baby eating, zombie kissing, I step on baby chicks. And that is the reality that Wizards of the Coast wants to maintain. And that seems to be the reality that Ben Riggs wants to maintain. Ben Riggs wants to maintain that Gygax did and said awful things and put in D&D awful things. And therefore, continuing to perpetrate the false narrative. If you played D&D before 2014, well, no, before last month, you were a horrible, awful person. The problem that I have, and I think most people have, with this commentary, with this false narrative of Wizards of the Coast that Ben Riggs, for whatever reason, has decided to focus on, is multiple. There's multiple things we have issues with this, right? So the first issue we have is, I lost my train of thought while I'm trying to find the picture. Hold on a sec. Because I'm an idiot. Here, something to look at. So there's multiple issues that we have with this and the false narrative and Ben Riggs choosing to focus on this. Are there things in the original publication of Dungeons and Dragons from 1970, whatever, that could be perceived as X? Absolutely. But there are also the same things that could be perceived as not X, depending upon who you are, right? There's an article where Gygax goes about talking about how he is sexist, and from one point of view, you could read that and go, wow, at least he admits he's a fucking asshole who's sexist and hate women. And from another point of view, you could look at it and go, no, he's being sarcastic. Look at the way this is written. This is obviously him taking what people have said about him, blowing it out of proportion in order to show you how dumb you are. There's plenty of people who have said, no, Gygax employed women. He loved women. He personally mentored Kelsey Dion. Multiple women were around during the creation and responsible for Dungeons and Dragons. The name Dungeons and Dragons came from a girl. In my personal little corner of the universe, I have interviewed and spoken to at least 120 different women throughout the years, maybe more, none of whom have experienced what it is people claim they experienced. Now, that's not to say it didn't happen. Are there people out there who experienced racism? Yes. Are there people out there who experience sexism, homophobia, ageism, whateverism? Yes. But that's not the game's fault. That's not Gary Gygax's fault. That's people. The game didn't tell you to be a horrible, awful person. You're a horrible, awful person playing the game. I've done horrible, awful things and said horrible, awful things while playing the game. That doesn't mean the game made me a horrible, awful person. I was a horrible, awful person before I played the game. So the problem, Ben Riggs, and the problem, Wizards of the Coast, is that we're not angry that you say Gygax did these things. We're angry that this is what you're choosing to focus on, and we're angry that you wrote what was supposed to be an impartial history of the origins of the hobby, but for whatever reason, you could not avoid going through the book step by step and pointing out each and everything as how horrible it is. You would have us that believe in the continuing rewritten history of Wizards of the Coast, the continuing rewritten history of Jeremy Crawford, which just changed again 2 weeks ago for anybody who's been paying attention to my channel. that anybody playing D&D before the new Wizards of the Coast timeline starts experienced these things, and these things happened. And if you play D&D before the new Wizards of the Coast timeline starts, you experienced these things or you perpetrated these things. And that D&D for the past 49 years, because they rewrote the history 2 weeks ago, was only played by the same group of old white dudes in the middle of nowhere. Nobody gay was allowed to play D&D. Nobody of any color of skin other than white was allowed to play D&D. Nobody of any race or creed other than Christian, Republican Christian, was allowed to play D&D. Definitely girls weren't allowed to play D&D. Okay, so you want to keep perpetuating that Gygax was sexist, and the book that we're talking about was written from this point of view of, look at all these horrible, awful things that these people did and said in this game. We want to change them, but of course we can't, because we're trying to be an unbiased historian. But we want to point it out to you because we want to show you how much better the game is now from the point of view of people who have only been playing the game for like 10 years. Ben Riggs, you're like, what, 30 years old? How are you a D&D historian? History is written by the person writing the book. If you wanted to write an impartial history of about from day one till whenever, you should have just done that. You should have just represented the material as it is and said, hey, look, here's the original material. I bet some of you out there don't have it, so here's a chance to relook at it again and revisit it again, and here's what happened from day one to day X, as far as we know, written by a guy who's only been playing for like 8 years. And who insisted that he was the only person who could write the history, but who hated Gygax. But you didn't. You made it an op-ed. You made it a not a history piece, a history of opinion piece. You made it an editorial. You went in and put your own little take on what Gygax said and Gygax did, and what you perceived, that's a word we're going to hear a lot, perceived in the game. You perceived it under the microscope that you were told to perceive it under in order to present a narrative. The current Wizards of the Coast narrative on the history of the game, which again was changed 2 weeks ago. All right. So as of 2 weeks ago, Wizards of the Coast would have you believe, unless you've been playing D&D for the past year, or you start playing D&D when the new books come out, you're an awful person. And people like me never got a chance to play the game. So if the reality of Ben Riggs in the book was true, I never played D&D. I certainly didn't play a 15-year-long D&D campaign where my DM was a person of color. I couldn't have, because according to this rewritten alternate history, Gygax created this mythology, and we all follow this mythology, and therefore, if you played the game, you wore this, which means people like me weren't allowed to play. People like TJ Storm weren't allowed to play. People like Connie Chung weren't allowed to play. But now that Wizards of the Coast has changed everything, that Ben Riggs has pointed out that Gygax said this under one perceived thing, we've saved it. We've saved D&D. We've made the game more approachable. As of 2 weeks ago, if you buy 2024 D&D, you are purged of your sins. And if you played D&D before 2 weeks ago, including our own version of D&D that came out in 2014, you are an awful person. You definitely practice these things. That's the false narrative that Wizards of the Coast continues to try and push, as they continue to try and erase anything that has to do with Gygax and the history from 2024 D&D. And sure, Ben Riggs, you can say, oh, look, Gygax said this. Okay, there's no question that Gygax said that. It is on paper. But perception and contents, Ben Riggs. if anybody wants to jump in. Perception and contents, Ben Riggs. Like I said, plenty of women, girls, individuals who identify as female over the years. I've never been in a game that didn't have at least 1 to 4 gamers in it who were or identified as female. Every girl, woman, female identifying humanoid that I've talked to in regards to this topic, never once, never once felt like I wasn't invited to the game, wasn't welcome. It's not the saying it didn't happen. I will admit my reality in regards to gaming is limited to playing up and down the California coast, playing in 4 different states and in another country. But yeah, I mean, I haven't met every single solitary girl that ever played every role-playing game ever. I don't know. But yeah, and as for members, as for racism, I'm a Jew. I never felt like I wasn't welcome at the game. In fact, it was the only place I ever felt like I was accepted. I was disabled. I never felt like I wasn't welcome at the game. In fact, it was one of the few places where I felt like I was welcome. I was questionable in my sexuality. Never once had a problem. Never once met an LGBTQ who said like, oh no, I couldn't play. The problem is not Ben Riggs. The problem is not Wizards of the Coast, whether Gygax or Dave said or did or believed these things. Nobody fucking cares, okay? We're talking about a stupid game about elves with sticks. We're talking about the Player's Handbook of 1976. We're talking about the narrative that you choose to focus on with these comments like, oh, Gary Gygax was a sexist, and I'm going to say it in big, bold letters because why? Because by saying Gary Gygax is a sexist, I get more attention. Look at all the attention I'm getting this Wizards of the Coast product. Look at all the attention we're getting for our product for saying bad things about Gygax and saying bad things about people who played D&D before 2 weeks ago. Look at all the free press. That's hundreds of people who are now paying attention to what I, Ben Riggs, said. That's hundreds of people who are now paying attention to this book that Wizards of the Coast put out that might not otherwise never have heard of it. If we continue to push the narrative of negativity, of hate, of disenfranchisement, of racism, sexism, homophobia, baby eating, zombie kissing, stepping on kittens, look at all the people who are going, hey, wait, maybe I should pay attention to this. As opposed to saying, hey, I played D&D, it was a lot of fun. I don't care. Yeah, I played D&D with a lot of people all over the world. Don't care. Hey, I played D&D with some people who are famous. Well, don't care. I've played tons of other role-playing games besides D&D. Yeah, don't fucking care. I'm Jewish. I played D&D. Don't care. Oh, there was that one time that one guy got kicked out of the game because he was Jewish, right? Because he was racist. Blah, 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 blah. Focus on the history of the game. Keep your personal opinion to yourself. If you want to write a personal opinion like Ben Riggs, historian and self-proclaimed internet luminary, did, go ahead. You already did, Ben. You could write your, here's my opinion of what I think happened. And of course, I'm going to focus on the negative because negative sells. Ben Riggs, you did that. Congratulations. You're recognized for writing your book. And in your book, you talk about the horrible, awful things that Gygax perpetrated, despite the fact that Gygax, employed multiple women. And I'm sure you say some good things about Gygax too, because Hopefully you are a historian and not an editorialism. Hello, Packrat. Welcome. Thanks for stopping by. Please like, please share, please subscribe if you haven't yet. Definitely a good point. It is easy to focus on the negativity and keep the attention on the negativity, on the hate wagon, because if you're focusing all our attention on that, we're not paying attention to the fact that, 5e was written by robots and that you've hired 90% of your staff, and Hasbro has given you 3 years to make $3 billion or else. Or the fact that it is a new edition and you lied to everybody. No, because if you keep our focus on this, nobody's going to point out the other things. Notice that in all this time, with one exception, nobody has talked about the new SRD. We know there is a new SRD. We know it goes live in September or after Gen Con, whenever the new Player's Handbook comes out. We know they are referring to it as Dungeons & Dragons 2024. We know that as 2 weeks ago, they have completely rewritten the history and the lore. We know that they are now blatantly telling us we lied, and yes, we changed so many things that there's no way you could not perceive this as a new edition. We know the new SRD is double the size of any other SRD Common Core ever. We know that the previous SRD was put under the wrong Common Core. The previous one, the one that came out after the OGL scandal, was put out under the wrong Common Core. They meant to put it under, or maybe they didn't mean, maybe they knew that they were putting it under the wrong one. So the new SRD that comes out in September will be under the right Common Core. It's double the size of the previous. It's double the size of any other SRD for any other game ever, according to people who have seen it. So yeah, but nobody's paying attention to that. We're all focusing on this. And as we're all focusing on this, Wizards of the Coast can do other shit that we will ignore, like inform us that they lied to us and completely rewrite history to the point where even the people that they were saying, oh, 2014 D&D saved the world, are now saying, no, 2024 D&D saves the world. And if you played D&D before 2 weeks ago, you're as bad as the people who played D&D 50 years ago. So yeah, this is why people are upset. We're not upset, again, in closing, because Ben Riggs came out and said this, or because the book says this. We're wrong. We're upset because, one, you focus on that and instead of just presenting the history and the unbiased, and two, it's an incorrect narrative. You focus on this narrative that would have people believe that unless you were in this small little bubble, you didn't play D&D and you weren't welcome to D&D. And there are no other games besides D&D. And nobody in the world was playing any other games besides D&D. And in this weird world, this world alternate history where only D&D is the only game played ever, only this small group of white men in the middle of Lake Geneva played D&D for the past 50 years because nobody else was welcome at the table. None of these others of millions of people all across the world and in space were welcome at the table. None of these other games existed. Gary Gygax said X. Therefore, Gary Gygax is Y. Therefore, if you play Gary Gygax's game, you're Z. That's the Jackie Robinson theory, right? Which is completely, incorrect. Jackie Robinson plays baseball. Jackie Robinson is a person of color, was a person of color. Therefore, all people of color play baseball. Now I'm going to give a plug to this guy here. Wow, thanks for stopping by, Griffith Morgan. I appreciate that. If you guys do not know who Griffith Morgan is, he is the Secret History of Blackmore dude. And the guy who has self-funded and done all this stuff to show us what really happened in all its wonderful, horrible, awful, amazing glory from day one to today. He made that movie. He's got a book. He's continuing to just put out stuff, most of it just out of his own pocket, to show you the real history. But guys, it happened. D&D happened. All right? Gygax said stuff. Gygax, horrible person? Sure, maybe. Gygax, wonderful person? Sure, maybe. Gygax and Dave wrote a game about elves with sticks. That's it. That's all that matters. I don't care what Gygax did outside of stupid game about elves with sticks. I want to know the history of the stupid game with elves with sticks. What I don't want to be told is this false narrative that people like me never played the game, that people like my friend Julie, may she rest in peace, never played the game, that people like TJ Storm never played the game. They want to steal the game, rewrite the game, but also take credit for the game. We want to paraphrase Griffin and other people, we want to stand on the shoulders of the people who came before us, steal everything they created, but we want to also just shit on them while we're standing on their shoulders and then present you with a brand new narrative. Give you guys one more chance to jump in if you want before I close down, because I don't like to talk for long periods of time. I mean, Gygax and Dave aren't even mentioned anymore. Sorry, Scott, they're not. It's a stupid game about elves with sticks. That's it. It's nothing else. And to try and make it anything else, to try and force this false narrative is wrong. Now, I've gone over what it is that I think Wizards of the Coast is doing. And as I will say in my often sort of weird defending Wizards of the Coast, what they're doing makes perfect sense. The way they're doing it is utterly stupid. The Disneyfication of, I like that. The Disneyfication of Dungeons and Dragons that's happening this year makes sense. Worked for Disney for a while. I don't know. I know people have reached out to him, but I don't know. So here's what I think Wizards of the Coast is trying to do. The Disneyfication of Dungeons and Dragons 2024. Let's look at what's the most recent one? Oh yeah, genies. They recently posted a thing about Infinite Staircase. One of the adventures in Infinite Staircase has a genie in it, and they would have us believe that this is the first time at a Dungeons and Dragons adventure that we've ever seen a genie. That's not true, and but you could read it as them saying that. This is the same thing they said with the dragons, that we've never given dragons lore or a place to live before. Again, that's completely untrue. I mean, not only is it untrue for every previous edition of Dungeons & Dragons, it's untrue based upon their own 2014 books. Everything before 2014, between 2014 and 2 weeks ago, there's dragons in those. There's 4 books completely dedicated to dragons and Tiamat. There's genies. But they don't want to be associated with any pre-existing conception of genies. When you look at the Wizards of the Coast genie, they don't want you to see Robin Williams' Big Blue Genie, nor do they want you to see the historically accurate portrayal of the djinn, nor do they want you to see any perception of genies as they have appeared in pop culture for the past couple hundred years. They want you to see the Wizards of the Coast genie, which is completely new. So technically, yes, you have never seen this genie before because this genie is unique to us. Why? Same reason when Disney made Aladdin, they created their own genie so they could merchandise it without anybody saying, oh, wait, the Wizards of the Coast 2024 genie will be completely unique to Wizards of the Coast, and they can merchandise that any way they want without worrying about stepping on anybody's tails, and they can present that genie in any way they want in upcoming video games. Disneyfication. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, there is horrible hundreds and hundreds of things wrong for that. But from a business point of view, sure, nothing wrong with that. I want control of my IP. I want to be able to market my IP in any way I possibly can without worrying about anybody else coming after me. Look what Disney did with Snow White. We'll do the same thing. But saying stupid shit like, well, nobody did it before. We never done it before. Why would you say that? Why? You're literally saying, hey, in 2014, we came out with the Dungeons and Dragons 5e Monster Manual. That never happened. You're rewriting your own history as well as the entire history of the world to fit your new mindset. And that new mindset, to get back to the point of view, is let's focus on the negative. Let's focus on the false narrative of stuff that, as far as I know, probably didn't happen, or at least not as bad as they would have you think. Let's focus on Gary Gygax as a person, as opposed to Gary Gygax, the guy who created the thing. Let's focus on the thing. No, there's not enough money in just focusing on the history of the thing. But if we focus on the negativity, if we focus on one word and we focus on the false narrative, that gets a lot more people looking at us. And as a lot of those more people are looking on us, then they're not paying attention to the fact that, we let go 90% of our staff. Literally, we're lying. The fact that we have three years to make $3 billion or else. No, we're not paying attention to that. And we're definitely not paying attention to the new SRD. Instead, we're paying into this. So shame on you, Ben Riggs. I get it. I get why you did it. I get that it puts money in your pocket and draws attention to your book. And shame on you, Wizards of the Coast. And people are like, oh, fuck you, Groganards, blah, blah, blah. You're angry because of this. Like, no, that's not why we're angry. We're not angry that Gary Gygax said something. Nobody fucking cares, except for maybe 3 people. We care about how you're presenting the hobby. We care about the false narrative. I care about the fact that I am being lumped in because I played D&D since 1976 or 74 or whatever into this false narrative. A false narrative that would tell you I never played D&D. So to quote somebody much smarter than me, in closing, if you're going to pay 6th edition, you're going to buy 6th edition. Nothing I say or do is going to change your mind because you've already made it up. If you play 6th edition and have a good time playing it, great. More power to you. It's a game, and it should just be about playing a stupid game about elves with stick, having fun. If you're like me and already own 5th edition, as is from 2014, you're like, I don't need another version. Not only have you put all the changes for free on the web, you said I don't need it. And I like the version as it is. Why would I want the new one? And if you're like a lot of other people, you're just like, fuck it. There's, I don't know, a couple million other games on the market between 1976 and now that do the same thing or better. There's hundreds of versions of D20 Fantasy that do D&D as good or better than D&D. There are hundreds, thousands, millions of other games in print. You name a genre, there is a game out there that supports that genre. Prove me wrong. Name one genre, and I will find a game that does it. If you're looking for an alternative to 5e because you don't want to give Wizards of the Coast money, but you still want to play 5e, and you still want to see third-party 5e product created, Tales from the Valiant / Project Black Flag, literally 5e, literally carrying on 5e. DC-20, best of 5e, 4e, and Pathfinder. Shadowdark, a game written by a woman who was mentored by Gary Gygax and who is nominated for 2024 Game of the Year, Product for the Year. Way to go, Kelsey! And if you're looking for a game that does something other than D20 fantasy, I can name you 10, 20, 100, 1,000, 1,000,000. Don't give Wizards of the Coast money. D&D is not the only option. And if you want to play D&D, there are better versions of D&D that Wizards of the Coast has made besides this piece of shit that's coming out in September. 5e is a good game. It's a good engine. It's not D&D, but it's a good engine. 4e is fucking brilliant. They just dropped the ball. 3.5 is great. Not, but Wizards of the Coast since 3.5 has been trying to rewrite, erase, regurgitate, represent the history of the hobby in such a way as if they created it. And this is just another straw in what they've been doing since 3.5. They're just finally admitting it. They're just finally admitting it. We're rewriting the history. We're rewriting our own history. We're literally rewriting shit we said a month ago, a year ago. Crawford pretty much came out last week and said, yeah, I fucking lied. Everything I've said is a lie. Jason 96, that's a completely separate topic for a completely different blog, but yes, you're absolutely right. 4th edition is the first chapter in how not to make a game. The second chapter in how not to make a game would be everything after 2019 that Wizards of the Coast has done with 5e leading up to today. Anyways, I've wasted almost 40 minutes of your time on this rant. If I apologize, I'm sorry. If I got any of the facts wrong, please feel free to reach out to me in a DM, and I will happily go back and create any mistakes. Thank you, Griffin Morgan, for liking and subscribe. So much respect for this dude. Wow, that's an honor, dude. You don't know how much the stuff you've done for the hobby means to people like me. I mean, I'm still a Hargrave guy, but yeah. So there we go. If I got anything wrong, please let me know and DM me. If you ever want to talk about this again, reach out to me. I'm happy to, interview people if they have time or whatever. At the end of the day, what can I say that I haven't said 1,000 times? It's a stupid game about elves with sticks, or superheroes with sticks, or spacemen with sticks, or cowboys with sticks, or cars. It's just a game. Guys, it's just a game. Just play the game and have fun. And if you don't like the game, find a different game. There's hundreds of them, thousands of them, millions of them. In fact, here we go. In fact, here we go. In fact, here we go. I don't know if you know this. I wrote a game. You knew it was coming. I wrote a game. I don't know if you guys know, I wrote a game. It's called Wretched Vigilantes. It's available on Lulu from the Red Room. I also recently published something with GRIMJIM called the Seth's Games and Ammo Summer Catalog. I wrote a goblin-based Weird West game called A Fistful of Goblins. It's going to be released recently through the Red Room. So really, at the end of the day, if you want to spend money on a game that's fucking awesome, buy mine. And now, get off my land, you fucking marks.